Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's masterclass where we'll be talking about why change and reinvention can be so challenging. So, I'm sure at some particular point of time in our lives, we've all experienced this. We've set off motivated, we've been quite determined to make some kind of change in our lives, and then we find that we're not successful. For whatever reason, we don't follow through. Very common at New Year's Eve, and I'm going to explain today why change is actually so difficult and also how we can actually be successful in it. So I'll put together a presentation for us, so let me head over to that right now. So as mentioned, we're going to be talking about why reinvention or change feels so hard. We're going to learn a little bit about the reality of change. So why this masterclass? So as mentioned, many of us have struggled with change. We've tried to lose weight, exercise regularly, be a better parent, be a better spouse, find a new love relationship, even look to change job, careers, or perhaps even start a business, or generally change ourselves or our life to become or live better. But then we constantly come up short. Does this sound familiar? And if so, you're not alone. We've all had this experience. So many of us set off with the intention and desire to change, but we don't change. We either don't start, or when we do start, we fail to implement what we know we should. We get started and then stop. We get started and consciously or subconsciously sabotage our own efforts. We start but don't seem to change. So this masterclass is here to answer the why. So why is change so difficult and why don't we change? So why is failing to change a problem? Well, if we don't take action, we don't change our lives and we miss out on the freedom change offers us. Change offers us freedom, the freedom to realize our full potential and become all we can be, to explore new opportunities and to grow and evolve, to realize our goals and dreams, to create and design our vision of our best life. We miss out on the opportunity to live what I call a legend life. So let's talk about what is change in our lives. So the reality is life is about change. Change is the one constant in life, and regardless if we like it or not, it's part of everyday life and something we all experience, with no exceptions. Change is anything that takes us out of our comfort zone and modifies what we perceive to be our status quo and what we perceive as stability and where things become predictable, where things are predictable. Change can be either internally driven or externally driven. So, what are the realities we must accept about change? Firstly, as mentioned, change is a reality of life. We're all going to experience it at some particular point of time. The world we live in and even our bodies are in a constant state of change. Change is neither good or bad, positive or negative. It just is. We cannot prevent, resist, or control change. We can only control how we respond to change. Change offers new possibilities and opportunities to learn and grow if we learn to embrace it. Change positively affects the trajectory of our future if we let it and we don't resist it. So what are some of the myths out there about change? Well, change is hard. It requires a lot of effort. It takes a lot of self-control, discipline, and willpower. You need to be highly motivated to create change. The size of the steps you take to create change determine the size of the result. So you need to take big steps to get big results. Small steps are slow. Big radical steps are quicker. Change is painful and not enjoyable and should be avoided. Well, we're going to dispel a lot of these myths in the summit, the Midlife Reinvention Summit. And then throughout this presentation, in fact, you'll get a better perspective on why change isn't all of these things. And there are other things that are actually, more importantly, that may be holding us back from being successful. So what are some of the causes of change in our life? So there are external factors. So this is where change is forced upon you and may come from left field. So you lose your job, someone dies, a relationship ends, there's financial loss, business loss, health challenges. Then there are internal factors. Change that is instigated or initiated by you because you are no longer satisfied with the status quo. You realize you're unhappy with your job, your relationship, your body, your life, your future, and so you decide it's time to change. So, what are 4 types of change we may experience? So life happens, and if you learn how to recognize and navigate change and the transitions that occur, you can appreciate their opportunities and take advantage of them. So change can be a joyous or painful experience, can be personal or work related, and can be broadly divided into 4 key categories. So there's anticipated changes, unanticipated changes, non-event changes, and sleeper changes. So let's go and expand them a little bit and get a better understanding of each. So anticipated changes. These are the ones you expect or anticipate as part of your life goals. So you might go to college, get a good job, get married, have children, and retire. So these allow us to set goals and measure how far we come or haven't come. Then there are unanticipated changes. They are unexpected and you cannot prepare for them. So a serious accident, the death of a loved one, a job loss, or spouse asking for divorce, they leave us feeling vulnerable and afraid and give us no choice but to adapt. Then there are non-event changes. So this is where we expect certain things for ourselves and get something different. So we promise a promotion and don't get it. We believe you have met the one, but it's not the case. These types of changes leave us with goals unmet and dreams dashed. Then there are sleeper changes. So change that creeps up on us when we're not aware. So we realize that we don't like a job, career, or relationship we're in, or that our body has changed. So we feel like a time has come and gone and then we've lost our opportunity. So now let's talk about change and transitions. So change is situational and external. It relates to a specific event or circumstance that has altered. It is the event, a moment in time. Change is the event that requires us to change internally. The internal change are transitions. So these are our internal personal response to change. It's the psychological process of adapting and accepting the change event. It's how we deal with change. And this is where we struggle. The actual event, we don't have any control over it. It happens. And this event doesn't actually create the impact. It's the internal transition we go through in response to or how we react to change where we struggle. So it's the physical, emotional, and psychological effect on us that transforms us. It is when we are faced with becoming something new. And that's what reinvention is actually all about. Reinvention is about navigating life, either internally or externally, making decisions to change, and then changing ourselves from the inside. So this is a transition. So we go through a transition from who we were before to who we become. So what are 2 ways you may manage change and transitions? So there are 2 completely different ways. So there is regressive. So this is where we resist change. We hold back, we stay stuck and don't move. There's no movement forward and perhaps we go backwards. And these are people who do this are what we call resistors. So our fears and limiting beliefs override our natural instinct to grow and evolve, because change is actually a natural mechanism and something that in fact our brain and our whole being actually likes to do. So when we are looking to grow, we sometimes limit ourselves from actually doing so and then prevent us getting the benefits of actually that occurs when we actually do change. So the result is we become irritable, frustrated, impatient, and anxious. Then there's regenerative. So this is what we call reinventionists. So we embrace change, we let go of the old and move forward. So the result is we feel ourselves growing, changing, improving, and shifting. We transform ourselves and feel excited and happy. And so this is what the actual Midlife Reinvention Summit's all about. It's about actually getting us to actually embrace change and want to change because of all the benefits that come from change. So this is the opportunity we have to evolve and grow into all we can become. So we want to eliminate the fears and limiting beliefs and other limiters like negative thought patterns, emotions, remove our fixed mindset so that we can actually grow and embrace change to become all we can. Because if we don't embrace change, we actually don't change. So we want to shift from being a one end of the spectrum, a resistor, someone who resists change, to a reinventionist. So this is a person who embraces change, is constantly looking to evolve, adapt, grow, so that they become the best version of themselves. So because when we become the best versions of ourselves, this is our opportunity to actually create the best life for ourselves as well. So there are three stages of change and transition. So as you can see in the diagram to the right, there are three different stages. So there's phase one, which is ending. So this is where we make a decision that it's time to change. And this is a period where we need to let go of our past. So let go of the old reality. So this is normally characterized by a bit of chaos emotionally. We are trying to maintain the old, but we're not going to be very successful in changing until we can let go of the actual past. So this is usually seen with denial, shock, anger, loss of identity, letting go, etc. Then there's another challenging period of time, which is called the neutral zone or transition zone, is sometimes referred to as the messy middle. So this is a little bit more comfortable, but it's still very psychologically and emotionally challenging. So it's a state of being in between who you were and who you're yet to become. Remember, change or reinvention is a transition into someone new, because to be able to live in the new changed environment we've created, we're actually going to have to change ourselves. And then the last stage is where we've actually accepted change, we've experimented, we've taken the necessary steps, we're now taking action, we're learning, we're growing, and then we're slowly integrating this new period of time and who we are into our life. So this becomes our new reality, and this is where true reinvention occurs. So the second uh, curve that I'm showing you here kind of mirrors the first, but this one is solely focused on the psychological reality of change. So everyone goes through the same experience, regardless if you're being someone who has a lot of experience in reinventing themselves, you will still feel some of these emotions. The difference is that you've probably developed the capacity to navigate this, and you've also probably developed a system for helping you to become ready to reinvent yourself. So the actual psychological or nervous system impact on you is going to be less. Remember, so our brain perceives change as being a threat. So this naturally activates our stress response, which sets off a whole range of hormones which trigger emotions, trigger our default patterns, behaviors that we normally use to cope with kind of like stress. So everyone goes through it. The difference is those who have built up their reinventability, who have developed a system for reinvention readiness, won't go through such a big dip. So when we go, so there are a number of distinct stages that we go through when we go through this particular curve. So we'll start off with denial. Do we really want to do this? Why do I need to do this? You may have a period, especially if this is like self-directed change, where you go, well, unless I'm going to change, you'd be a little bit happy about it. But then suddenly, then it hits you that you're going to change. So the stress response becomes activated. Then suddenly there's fear. Then this kind of like degrades into frustration, into anger. And then at the very bottom, there's depression, where you're going, I can't do this. Why do I need to do this? There's no way I'm going to get through this, etc. So this is what people actually go through with New Year's resolutions. So they make a big decision to actually go off and do something. Then they start taking some huge action. They get overwhelmed. Then all these emotions start showing up because their nervous system's dysregulated. So they start experiencing frustration, anger. So they're not able to fully utilize their cognitive part of their brain. They're totally in a fear response. And then eventually, because they're not able to take action, they go, see, I'm not meant to change. Then they get depressed. And then there's disillusionment. And then they stop. They don't go any further. Or eventually they persist. And then what happens? You start to take action, you take small experiments, and then you start to accept that change is possible, that you are the kind of person who can actually make change happen. You make a commitment, a full commitment to the whole process, and then finally there's integration into your whole life. So everyone will go through this cycle. But people who have a capacity and have also built up their reinvention readiness will not have such a big dip. They'll actually have a little bit more of a lull, and then it will come back because they know how to self-regulate themselves. They know how to manage their actual emotions. They know strategies to make sure that the momentum gets them going. They take small actions. So when we take small actions, we build our confidence, then we get a little bit of momentum going, and then slowly we are actually able to convince our nervous system and our brain that there is not a threat. This is actually something we can handle, and then off we go, and then finally the change is implemented in our lives. So the reason I'm showing you this is to make you understand that having the emotional reaction you do to any kind of like change is perfectly normal. It follows a natural path. To know where you are within this gives you an idea what coping mechanisms you can put in place, what strategies you can use to actually get you back to where you're actually moving towards the change you would like to achieve in your life. So for a moment now, I'd like you to think about a recent period of time where you had a situation forced upon you where you needed to make a change, and then see if you can recognize yourself in any of these different phases of change. Because we all go through this. No one is impervious to it. As I said, it just depends on how long you end up being in this doldrums, the messy middle. So this middle area where you haven't really changed yet. And then when you get on that upward part of the curve, and this is where we're actually starting to become the person who can actually live the change we're looking to create in our life. Because we don't want what can happen. You'll see there is denial, where denial is we get started, then we get overwhelmed, then we go, no, I can't do this. Change, what change? I don't want to do this. And then we leave. Or we go get frustrated, we get angry, we get a little bit depressed, and then we decide not to proceed, and then we leave the actual change process, so we don't actually get the benefits of change. So we don't want to know that. So what we understand, normal process, we all go through emotions. Now we need strategies to actually navigate this more effectively. And this is what actually we'll be discussing in masterclass 3, where we talk about reinvention readiness, and then also about building the reinvention capacity, which is called reinventability. And this will be in masterclass 4. So what is the importance of this curve? So I'm going to rehash some of the things I've just mentioned. It highlights the change as an emotional process that follows a predictable emotional path. That as we move through change, emotions fluctuate dramatically, motivation rises and falls, resistance appears naturally, uncertainty activates stress responses. Remember, our brain likes certainty. It likes the sense that it's in control of what's happening in the future. And when we take that away, then we get a stress response, survival, brain kicks in, and we lose use of the prefrontal cortex, which would be thinking about opportunities, solutions, and then ways we can navigate this more effectively. So the emotional stages are anxiety, denial, frustration, depression. As I remember, this is the very bottom of the curve. And then as we get it on the upswing, there's experimentation, there's final acceptance that change is possible and that you are the person who can actually make change happen. And then there's integration into your life. And then experimentation is an important one because a lot of people, when they look to create change, they go all in without really experimenting, deciding what is the best path, and they actually choose a path which may not be correct for them. And then they get overwhelmed and then they end up getting off the change experience. And that's why built into the Midlife Reinvention Summit, we'll actually be teaching you to create little experiments to validate your goals, validate the vision you have of yourself, validate the path you would like to actually take before you overcommit and then get overwhelmed. Because if you overcommit, and then it's not the right path, then you will eventually not continue. You'll just leave the whole change process. So we don't want that to happen. What we want to do is take steps. We want to get data so that we can make the best decision for us and then eventually come up with the right path we want to follow. And then we create our full goals and vision, and then that becomes what we pursue going into the future. So what's the importance of this curve? It highlights that one of the reasons people struggle with reinvention is that change is emotionally disruptive. So remember, brain sees change as a potential threat to our survival. It creates a stress response, which leads to limiting beliefs coming up, protective patterns, so patterns to stop us feeling fear, etc. And then a whole range of behaviors may come up, coping mechanisms we use when we're actually stressed, all of which impede our ability to change. So the thing is, and the reason I'm showing this curve is because many of us, when we go through the change process, we may think something's wrong with us. I'm not a person who's capable of reinvention. I'm not the person who can actually change. It's all my problem. But if we look at this curve and then we understand that this is a normal emotional reaction, then it empowers us to realize that we can actually deal with whatever change we have. We just need the right strategies and build the right capacities. So it's a reminder that change naturally creates uncertainty. It leads to nervous system activation. It leads to identity disruption and leads to cognitive overload. So identity disruption, because we will have to become someone else to actually create the change. And then this can create a bit of an identity gap, especially if we think we're this type of person. Then this change that we're looking to implement, and we are not that kind of person yet, well, that creates a potential barrier to us continuing, and cognitive overload, because we're going to have to learn new skills, new capacities to be able to do this. And if we do too much, we can get overwhelmed. Our brain goes too much. This is a threat. and then net result is I can't do this, and then we'll leave the change process. So understanding change curve helps us normalize the emotional experience. We stop thinking something's wrong with us. We begin to realize I'm just the same as everyone else. We all go through this. And then if I'm in particular feeling these kind of like emotions, there's work that I need to do to get me reinvention ready. I also need to start developing some of the capacities that will actually help me navigate change more effectively. So it prepares us for resistance because we understand that our brain is naturally going to see this as a potential threat. It's going to activate our nervous system. So we're going to expect fear, we're going to expect uncertainty, we're going to expect setbacks, we're going to expect emotional fluctuations. So instead of being surprised by them, we can prepare for them. So we can set ourselves up to be able to navigate for them. We can set up what are called implementation intentions, where if this happens, then I'll do this. If I get stressed, here's my coping mechanism. If I feel emotionally charged, this is how I will relax myself. So we're able to create a plan to deal with what we can actually expect, which means we're more likely to successfully navigate them. Also, we're able to build strategies for adaptation. So remember where I talked about reinventability. So we're able to build our resilience. We build our ability to self-regulate. We're able to build our adaptability, ability to handle change. We're able to develop support systems. And we're able to develop reinvention skills. So, and then if we do all of this, then we're going to move through the transition period faster. So the messy middle, we're going to navigate through that more effectively. We're going to get to the other side where we're actually starting to experiment, we're starting to implement, and then we're starting to integrate. So the goal is less resistance, faster recovery, smoother adaptation, and intentional reinvention. So instead of reacting to change, we start to respond to it. And then even we plan ahead to be able to navigate it. So we're going to design our reinvention experience. So it also helps us understand why most people struggle with change, because most people fail at change because they understand change to require something external to them. So they think it's all about motivation, information, positive thinking, and willpower. So many people, and I'm sure all of us have experienced this, felt we didn't have any willpower when we failed at any kind of like change attempt. We weren't motivated enough. We needed to build a whole lot of motivation to be able to do it. We needed to get a whole bunch of information. So we attend summits, we attend masterclasses, we do courses. We've got heaps and heaps of information. And then if we don't have enough of that, we won't be actually successful. When what I want to point out here for you is that actually 70% of learning comes from experience. So 70% of human learning is from what we learn from experiences. 20% is what we learn from other people. 10% is actually the information we gain from courses, masterclasses, books we read. So only 10% is from information gathering. 70% is from practical application. And that's why built into the Midlife Reinvention Summit, we have you taking action, doing experiments, because that's where you learn. You gather information from actually doing things, and then you apply that information, and that's where you get the real learning. That's where you feed your brain the data it needs to be able to work out the best way for you to move forward. So change is all about internal. So to be sustainable, it needs to be driven internally and not externally. So it requires emotional adaptation, nervous system regulation, identity transformation. Remember, to create change, you actually have to be the person capable of living the life of whatever change you're actually looking to implement. For instance, so if you would like to change, you would like to release weight. Maybe you're unhappy with your body, you would like to do something there. But if you perceive yourself as to be an overweight person, this is your identity. I'm not a person who likes exercise. I'm not a person who likes healthy food. I'm not a person who can ever lose weight. I've always been like this, and that's your identity. But you have this idea that you would like to change. You would like to be, less weight, more active, etc. But you don't see yourself as that person. Well, there's a big gap there, because the habits and behaviors you have will not become the person, will not allow you to actually lose weight or have a healthier body or a healthier diet, nutrition, exercise more, whatever, because you're not the person who does that. So until you learn to change yourself and perceive yourself as that person who can actually lose weight, who has the identity of wellness being part of your life, you will naturally resist the habits and behaviors you need to actually become this person. So you actually need to transform your identity to be able to embody any kind of change. So also there's behavioral consistency and psychological flexibility. So now we're going to talk about what specifically prevents people from changing. I think we've got an idea what may be some of the changes, but we're going to go in a little bit more detail to reinforce it. So firstly, let's talk about our comfort zone. So because to change, we need to get out of our comfort zone. So what is our comfort zone? It's a psychological state in which we feel at ease, stable and control and secure because we're not being tested or challenged. So, and what is the impact of change? Change takes us out of our comfort zone. It challenges us and the status quo. It creates in our brain a sense of uncertainty and lack of control and a perception of a potential threat to our survival. It triggers a stress response. So why do we like to stay in our comfort zone? So it's an evolutionary survival mechanism. In the comfort zone, we have a perception of stability, security, predictability. So we have a sense of control over our lives. Change is a threat to this and possibly our survival. Change in behavior requires additional resources and effort, and our brain prefers to conserve this for when our survival is threatened. So our default state, or our brain's default state, is to keep us in the comfort zone. So it's a bit of a dichotomy. It's a bit of a strange thing, our brain, because it on one side wants to keep us safe and secure and keep us in a survival zone, but on the other hand, it also wants us to grow and evolve, because we don't evolve, we don't grow, we don't move forward unless we actually changing. So it flips between these two things, and we've got to navigate this carefully ourselves. Oops. So what prevents people trying to change? So as mentioned, we're naturally resistant to change. We're wired for survival, and our brain naturally sees change as a potential warning sign of danger and possible threat. Change is uncomfortable. Change requires giving up old comfortable habits developed over time. It creates a subtle sense of unease, even when we're excited or hopeful about change. So I can imagine many of us have gone on a plane trip, like we're going on a trip overseas, we're all excited, but at the same time, there's a little bit of unease there because we're getting out of our comfort zone. Oh my God, what could happen over there? Am I going to have a good time? Is there anything, am I going to be safe when I'm over there? What is it a safe place to go? What are all these possibilities? So all of these things go through because we're getting out of our comfort zone. We don't have complete control over our environment like we think we do when we're at home, and now we're going to go somewhere else. So there's a level of uncertainty and control, and that creates this unease within us. So this is perfectly normal. So there's a lack of clarity. Often we feel like we want or need to change, but don't know where or in what direction. Fear of failure. We've tried to change in the past, not succeeded, and so assume the same result will occur in the future. We also have cognitive biases that make change difficult. Psychology and neuroscience offers us some core reasons why change is hard. We have a bias for the status quo, as we've mentioned, so we're hardwired to resist change. We have a bias for sedentary behavior. As mentioned before, our brain likes to conserve energy for when we actually need it, in case we're threatened. We have a bias for limiting decisions. Our brain's capacity is limited. So if there are too many decisions we need to make, which occurs in change because we don't have any habits or behaviors that are automatic, we are actually required to make a lot of decisions, and we have a finite capacity to make those kind of decisions. So it creates fatigue, decision fatigue. And then if we go into decision fatigue, we'll default back to automated processes or take no action. So we need to make it simple for our brain. We don't want to overload our brain with having too many changes we're going to make by making them too complex, because this will overwhelm it and then it'll default back to automated processes and habits. It'll actually create a stress response, which will mean our limiters, our limiting beliefs, fears, negative thought patterns, negative emotions will all come into play to make us go back to the status quo. We also have a present bias. We value the present over the future. So this leads us to choosing smaller immediate rewards at the expense of larger, more significant rewards that occur in the future. So we may binge on Netflix right now because we get immediate gratification, rather than doing the extra work we need to do to get to perhaps write a blog, do a video, create a course or something, which may give us greater rewards through actually gaining us more money. So we go through the present, short-term gratification over the longer term, which may have bigger rewards. We have an optimism bias. We overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes experiences and underestimate negative ones, which leads to poor decision making and to not taking preventative action. So when we set goals, we go, yeah, I'm going to get this, I'm going to be successful, but we don't do any evaluation of possible obstacles, possible challenges we may face, so we don't prepare for them, we don't plan for them, and when they occurred, they blindside us, and we go, oh, this is too hard, and then we give up. So we also have a loss aversion bias, so we're more sensitive to the prospect of loss than a gain of equal value. So what does that mean? So when we are giving up on our Netflix binging, we immediately feel that loss over doing the extra effort, which may give us we may posting on Instagram, posting a video on YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever to help us grow our business. But we're actually, Netflix gives us it's perhaps a similar kind of game, but we'll go for the one that is less prospect of causing us a loss. So let's kind of like sum up why the brain resists change. So your brain is designed to keep you safe, not comfortable with uncertainty. So the brain interprets uncertainty as a potential threat. When facing change, predictability decreases, identity becomes unstable, certainty disappears. We have a sense of a loss of control. This activates a stress response, emotional reactivity, and avoidance behaviors. The brain prefers familiarity, certainty, predictability, known identities, and established habits, even when those things are no longer serving us. So even though our life in the comfort zone may not be what we would like, and we're unhappy, unfulfilled, dissatisfied, the very fact that change is a bigger threat will make our brain keep us in the comfort zone. Even though changing, evolving ourselves could lead to a better life for ourselves, could make us feel more fulfilled, satisfied, the brain will default to keeping us in the comfort zone because that is safe. So unless we can convince the brain that change is actually safe, change, we create some control around it by having a plan, having strategies, create safety by regulating ourselves. We take small steps and we prove to our brain that we've got this, we can do this. So we build confidence. So if we don't do any of this activity, which is part of the building reinvention readiness, building reinventability, then our brain will say, too hard, too risky, let's get back to the comfort zone. So other things holding us back, so our beliefs. So I'm not enough, I don't have the capacity to change. Remember my example of the person looking to achieve weight loss. I'm not that type of person. So how many times have you had a conversation with someone and then they say they would like to change, but unfortunately I'm not that type of person. This is the type of person I am. So they've already limited themselves because they said something and that they don't have any capacity to change, which means invariably if they do try to change, they will not be successful. So I'm too old to change. So this is particularly relevant for us in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. Many of us assume that because we've spent so much time on this planet, that there's no way we can possibly change. This is who we are. This is who we've been since the day of dawn. We can't change, which is actually not true. And even worse, it's too late to change. Well, I'm going to say to you at age 56, I certainly don't believe it's too late to change. I have to be around for another 40 years. So that's another lifetime. So I still have plenty of time to change. So I think all of us have plenty of time to change. So the other thing holding a lot of us back is a fixed mindset. So what is a fixed mindset? It's an assumption that we were born with a certain level of intelligence, skills, and abilities, and that cannot change. So it means that we hold ourselves back from engaging in other activities because we don't believe we have the capacity to learn how to do this new activity. So it's characterized by fear that you might not be smart enough or talented enough. So it leads you to avoiding challenges. That leads you to avoiding change because you don't believe you're the kind of person that can actually do it because you have a fixed set of abilities, a fixed set of capabilities. You've got a fixed set of intelligence and you cannot change. So this is what holds a lot of people back. What we really want to develop is a growth mindset which sees ourselves as someone capable of learning, capable of changing, capable of developing new capacities, new skills, new abilities to changing, in fact, completely who we are as a person. So the two biggest mistakes people make when trying to change, they take no action, or they start taking action and stop. So they don't start to undertake or fail consistently to undertake the habits and behaviors necessary for change to occur. Change doesn't occur overnight. It requires consistent application of effort, requires us consistently working towards whatever we'd like to achieve. The second biggest mistake, they look to make big transformative action. They look to take those big set those big, huge goals and then take huge action to actually achieve those goals. The problem with this is it overwhelms us. So you can imagine to the brain when we start to make these big, huge changes, all the fire alarms start going. This is high risk. This is going to consume a lot of energy. There's no guarantee of success with taking all these moves. I don't have the ability to learn these new skills, capacities. This is not who I am currently. I don't have these abilities. So we have no confidence, etc. So huge stress response waiting to happen. That's why we take small, consistent steps and actions, slowly building confidence in our ability to proceed. So what are some other reasons why people fail at change? They do the wrong type of change. We seek to change for the wrong reasons or strive for a goal to which we're not entirely committed as we have adopted someone else's goals. So we've been told we need to earn X amount of money. We need to be a certain body image. We need to have this type of career. We need this type of job. We need to go out with this type of person. So these are someone else's goals. Or we're watching Instagram and then we see all these people having these amazing lives and they doing all these amazing things and they have these routines, these rituals or whatever. And so we decide to adopt them. But this is the wrong type of change because this is someone else's life. What we need to do is find out what drives us, what we personally need, and develop and set goals and change objectives related to what is important to us personally. Because if we don't, we won't follow through. So we take the wrong approach, an ineffective process or no process at all. We try to change but don't have a process to guide us. So this is the biggest challenge. Most people set the goals but don't actually have a process to actually get them to actually achieve those kind of goals. So this is what we're trying to deal with or address inside of the Midlife Reinvention Summit. We're actually creating a reinvention blueprint. So we're going to create a plan, so a personalized plan. So I'm not giving you a plan. What I'm doing is giving you a structure to build your own plan, because remember, it needs to be your plan, your goals, your process to actually get there. I'll give you a framework to help you create your own process. So we lack clarity. We're not clear on the real reason or why for wanting to change. So we don't have a powerful why. It's unlikely that we'll follow through. And we're focused on the wrong goals. We're focused on the outcome and not the process of how we get to achieve our end goals. So our end goal, the outcome, is just to have something to shoot for. What's important is the process that gets us to that outcome, because that outcome is somewhere out in the future. And there are a lot of different things that can influence that. So it gives us a direction of where we go, a little bit like when we're traveling. We go, I am going here. This is the end destination. And in between, there are lots of different ways you'll actually get to that end destination. But without that end destination, you don't have a plan. You don't have the steps and process to get there. But what we're really going to be focusing on is the process that gets us striving towards that end goal. And the outcome is not as important as taking the relevant steps to get us towards there. So other reasons we fail, we try to make too big a change or too many changes at one time. So our brain, as I mentioned, feels overwhelmed and resists change. We rely on extrinsic motivation. We look to rewards external to us. So how much money we'll make. We may look in the short term, but are not sustainable in the long. So these may work in the short term, like how much money we'll make, the people we'll meet, etc. So it's short-term things that motivate us in the short term, but won't keep us going in the long term. What we really need for intrinsic motivation are things like where we feel we're growing, where it builds connection, we're related to our purpose, the contribution and impact we want to make. Well, these become sustainable in the long term, and that's called intrinsic motivation, and that's what we should be focused on. So we don't acknowledge or celebrate our wins. So we do have progress. We do slowly make steps towards our end goal, but we don't recognize ourselves for this, because remember, this journey isn't easy. It's challenging. We're getting out of our comfort zone. We're taking steps that require some kind of effort. So if we don't provide ourselves with acknowledgement of our progress, then it's easy to become deflated and easy to lose motivation. So we need to recognize the progress we're actually making along the way. So there's a lack of support. We try to change by ourselves and don't create a support network, and so lose motivation. So much of popular media, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, etc., is the solo entrepreneur story, solo person who does it all by themselves. But invariably, no one does or achieves anything by themselves. There's usually a support network behind them. So for ourselves, we also don't need to do it by ourselves. So we need to find other people to hold us accountable, other people to support us when things get challenging, other people to provide input, advice, insights, etc., to help us keep on track. So we feel we lack freedom. We've adopted someone else's process for change. So remember what I mentioned, that we need to develop our own process. So when we're looking to adopt any mechanism to help us change, we should be looking for frameworks that allow us to implement, to create something that is personal to ourselves. Because another component of intrinsic motivation is the feel that we have autonomy. If we don't have autonomy, we don't feel we have autonomy, because I got to follow this rigid program, which is why a lot of weight loss programs don't work, because you got to follow to the letter, got to weigh this food, you got to do this number of calories, this specific process, etc., all the way through. And then eventually what happens after like 1 month of this, 2 months of this, 3 months of this, we get burnt out, because we don't have any flexibility, we don't have any sense of freedom, and then we leave the actual program. Another reason we view change negatively and don't enjoy the process of change, we see change as a chore, an obligation, and not enjoyable. So we have failed to see how effort can be enjoyable. So think about any Olympian, any successful athlete, any successful business person. Do they achieve their success or the results they achieve by not working? No, they apply effort and they get a result. So the same for reinvention. When we apply effort and we slowly change into who we're looking to be, or we change our life in a small way through effort, well, that's certainly a lot more fulfilling when we're not required to apply effort. And then reinforcing that, if we don't have a compelling reason to pursue change, so we've not defined our why for actually doing change, well, it's unlikely that we'll actually continue. So how do you succeed at change and transitions? So as mentioned, there's a bit of a dichotomy with the brain. The brain resists change, but on the flip side of this, there are a number of mechanisms that are in the brain that are there to support us in actually creating change. So there is a goal striving mechanism. So we are naturally driven toward growth, meaning, progress, fulfillment. So we're designed to pursue better futures. We're designed to be goal striving beings. So our reward system, our natural inbuilt reward system, rewards us when we're striving for something. So we have an adaptive mechanism. So the brain and nervous system can learn, evolve, build new habits, form new neural pathways called neuroplasticity. So we are not fixed, we can change things. So we've actually got this built into us. So when we stress ourselves or we get out of our comfort zone, then our brain looks to adapt, to change, so that we can go into a new comfort zone. We have a success and solution mechanism. So when we focus intentionally on meaningful goals, the brain begins scanning for opportunities, learning for feedback, solving problems, making adjustments. So what we focus on shapes perception. So this is our articulating system. So when we tell our brain something is important, then it begins looking for these kind of opportunities, opposed to when we have like a negative kind of like mindset, or we're negative thought patterns where we're just looking to protect ourselves. When we tell our brain what's important to us, what we'd like to achieve, we make it clear that it's very important. Our brain starts not looking for threats, begins looking for opportunities and possibilities. So it's a mechanism we need to leverage if we want to be successful in change. We're also, as mentioned, throughout supporting all these other systems so they all work together. We have a reward mechanism which creates motivation, momentum, confidence, reinforcement. So when we take action and then we make some form of progress, this actually gives us more motivation. Our reward center rewards us for actually achieving the goal we set for ourselves, for making that progress, and then builds more motivation to keep our momentum going forward. So what are the requirements for sustainable change? So, or reinvention, there are three things that leverage our brain's change mechanism. We need a clear strategy, what I call a reinvention blueprint. So a structured plan for change. So we give our brain a clear way forward, so which gives it a sense of control. So it knows where it's going, it knows what's important. So to remove some of the uncertainty. We need reinvention readiness. We need the mental and emotional capacity to navigate uncertainty. So we need to help our mind, our emotional and nervous system be prepared to handle change. And then there's reinventability. So this is our long-term ability to adapt, evolve, and grow continuously. So do I have the capacities to adapt repeatedly? Because that's our end goal, to be able to continuously reinvent ourselves, because reinventing ourselves is the pathway to achieving personal excellence, to realizing our potential, to being able to create the kind of life we want for ourselves. When we're in the comfort zone, we're never changing, we're just slowly stagnating, which I'll talk a little bit more in our next masterclass. So what are some success principles? Basically a summary of what we just talked about. So change only comes from getting started. To change, we must first take action. Action results in feedback and opportunities to learn and improve. Action also creates momentum, which in turn gives us motivation and inspires further action. Change is achieved through small steps taken consistently. Change only occurs from taking effective action. So action that is intentional, mindful, and deliberate. So it's not reacting to things. It's not just taking action for the sake of taking action. It's like just doing your to-do list won't get you where you need to go. You need to make conscious, intentional, and mindful decisions and take conscious, intentional, mindful action to be able to get to where you want to go. So let's use an example to clarify. So how many people do you see in the gym who just go through the motions? So they show up, use all the machines, leave, lucky to have a sweat on their brow. Well, that wasn't intentional, mindful, or deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is where you go in with the intention to see if you can improve yourself. You go in with the intention to do this the best you possibly can, look to improve how you performed the last time, and then you're mindful during the whole process. You're actually becoming in tune with whatever you're doing. You're fully engaged, and that's what deliberate practice is. It's not just going through the motions. You're continually challenging yourself, so you never allow yourselves to settle, and should look to take it, and you should be looking to get yourself out of your comfort zone constantly, because remember, we don't grow We don't learn, we don't change, we don't become better unless we're outside of our comfort zone. So we've got to remove failure from the vernacular. There's only feedback, opportunities to learn and improve. There is no failure unless we give up and we don't continue to move forward. So I use an acronym when I discuss fail. I call it first attempts at initial learning. So if you're not successful at something you're doing, it's because you're in the early stages of learning. It's not because you've failed, it's just because you haven't developed the skills, the knowledge, the experience that allows you to perform whatever it is you're looking to perform at the level you would like to perform. So you're in the early stages of a learning. So you're in the first attempts at initial learning. Change can be challenging, but it can be fun. Prepare yourself for the fact that change requires effort, but this does not mean it can't be fun. Like, ask any competitive athlete, ask any successful business person, ask any salesperson, ask anyone who performs at a high level, and whether or not it is easy or the satisfaction comes from doing the hard work and getting the result you've been working towards. So take small steps every day. So this is not big action, big return. It's taking consistent effort over time. So have an action plan. So you must make a plan for what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Without a dedicated time reserved to undertake the actions and habits you're committed to do, it's likely you'll never do them. So if you don't have a plan, you're planning for failure. I think it's Benjamin Franklin's favorite phrase. So learning by doing, remember what I said, 70% of learning is actually from experience. So you need to leverage the fact that humans are all inherently experiential learners. We're natural learners who instinctively learn from the experiences that result from our actions. If we do not take actions, we inhibit our ability to learn and without our ability to achieve our goals. So going off, learning, doing courses, doing masterclasses, even attending the summit and not taking any action isn't real learning. This only represents 10% of your total learning experience. 70% is through taking action. 20% is what you learn from other people. And 10% is just gathering information. So if you're got this inverted and then 70% of what you do to try and actually learn how to change is learning, well, you're not actually going to be successful at change. You need to get out there and actually apply it, and that's when real change begins to happen. So this is me finishing up. But before I go, I do have a small favor for you. So tell me, what is, in the comments below, what is the number one thing of value you learned today? And then also let me know if you have any questions or feedback about what we discussed today. So, and I want to leave you with a parting message that change is inevitable. Be the designer of the change you would like to see in your life. Become a reinventionist. A reinventionist is someone who sees change as being the way they live their life. So they actually proactively look to create change to help them evolve. So become a reinventionist, become the designer of the change you would like to see in your life. So don't continue reacting to life. Don't continue just allowing life to push you in the directions you end up going. It's time to take back control of your life. So because we are, if we're willing to take action, the captains of our own ship, so it's up to us to make a decision that we are able to actually change. As mentioned, that change requires having a plan, and then that's something we're going to be working on in the Midlife Reinvention Summit 2, it requires us to be reinvention ready, which means we need to build the capacity to be able to handle the fact that change is not easy, that it creates resistance in our brain. And thirdly, we need to build the capacity to reinvent ourselves. The benefit of doing this is that whenever we change, we've built that capacity already, and it will always be accessible to us. But if we don't have that capacity, when we get hit by change, that's why it can have such a dramatic effect on us. And then all of us have an experience, an emotional response to change. No one is impervious to it. It's just whether or not we are prepared for change, because we've been developing the capacity to handle change and being prepared to navigate change effectively. And that's what we're going to be talking about in Masterclass 3 and then also Masterclass 4. Masterclass 2, which will be released tomorrow, is all about complacency syndrome. So we'll talk a little bit about the dangers of being in the comfort zone, what the consequences of that are, and why reinvention is the antidote to complacency syndrome. So I hope you got a lot of value out of this. You have a better understanding why you're struggling with change. And remember, you are not any different to anyone else. We all struggle in some shape or fashion. What we need to do now is build our capacity to navigate change in the future. So I'll leave you with this, and remember to leave me a comment. Let me know what the biggest learning you had today from today's session, and then also if you have any questions or feedback. Well, thank you, and until the next masterclass.